And good morning, everybody. Sorry, we're just a little bit late. That's my fault. We are going to bring in our other Facebook groups real quick, Atlanta Falcons on SI and Scott Kennedy Sports. Get those going and we'll get into it because we got a lot to talk about today. And as they get rolling, our Facebook groups come in, we're good to go. Welcome in, everybody. This is the Falcons Podcast. And as far as I'm concerned, it's football season. We've got a game in 2 days, Nick. How excited are you? You look a hell of a lot better today, my friend. I hope you're feeling better too. I know it was kind of a rough weekend with COVID and all kinds of stuff. Like, that's not enough.
Yeah, no, I'm doing better. Only had to wake up 2 times last night to get the little guy back down. He's still pretty congested. So he's soothes himself with a pacifier. And when you have a pacifier and you can't breathe through your nose, not a good time, I guess. So slept a little better last night. I think we're going to be back to some level of normalcy today, going back to daycare, back to work for me as well, unless things change between now and the start of the day. But doing well, excited to be here. It's Wednesday, man. This is just, I'm ready to get back into a routine.
I know. We'll get through today, and it's like I love Friday football. Hell yeah. I'm Falcons play Friday, right? I don't usually think that far ahead. I'm like, there's games every day. I haven't quite figured it out. I know my son's got a football game on Friday night too, so be dual screening a little bit. Go to one, watch the other on reserve. But we'll get into all of that today. We go live every Monday and Wednesday, and once we hit the season, we'll probably preseason games. I'm thinking Friday once we start getting into the games too. Even if Nick doesn't want to join us, we'll probably pick up on Fridays again. But we go live 8:30 a.m., 8:35 a.m., Monday, Wednesday for sure on these channels because we like having the conversation with y'all. Guys like Eric coming in before we even got started. Eric, welcome in. Good morning. Michael, we can always count on being here. Appreciate you, Michael. And he gets up bright and early with us. He's out in Tucson, Arizona. So you know he's up early. He says, good morning, Scott and Nick on the Falcons podcast. Right back at you. Eric, he says, I just picked up my tickets to take my oldest brother and my son to their first NFL game on opening Sunday. That'll be awesome. It'll be my first game at the Benz, traveling from Virginia. Any suggestions? Eric, that's an email. Hit me up on that. Skinnedy, S-K-I, and then E-D-Y, or shoot me a DM at Scout Kennedy on Twitter. But have fun. Get there early. There's lots to do. So have a great time. You'll have a blast. Walk around.
I have one suggestion. Don't forget to drink water.
I was going to say, drink lots of water. That was my next one.
Water.
It's going to be what, September 9th? And, luckily it's inside once you get in, but you want to spend as much time as you can outside before the game. The retractable roof, hopefully it'll be open. It's depending on how hot it is. But fall in the South is so awesome, but it ain't fall yet, guys. It's September can be freaking brutal. So fall in the South is amazing for football weather. But yeah, well, we can get into all of that stuff. Rusty, I see your question here. I don't want to show it because it's got a profanity on it. But he says, I heard that Bo Nix is a Broncos third stringer on the depth chart right now. Are you at all worried that he couldn't beat out Zach Wilson or Jarrett Stidham? Just a reminder on this one. At this time last year, Bijan Robinson was fourth string. And we told everybody how ridiculous that was. That's just where rookies go. Nick and I are going to get into this a lot more on Mile High Huddle Broncos for Breakfast in an hour. But we're going to get into our own depth chart, and we'll start talking about why the Falcons depth chart matters a little bit more to me than one full of rookies.
Yeah. Carl and I talked specifically about Bo Nix being third string last year, and I described it as small potatoes. Doesn't mean a lick. I'd still put him as the favorite to be the week one starter based on who I've spoken to, based on what the big media with boots on the ground in Dove Valley, Denver, have spoken with. So third string, all the rookies are third string. It's a Bill Parcells move is how it's being painted, and Sean Payton does that historically, I guess. So not surprising.
Yeah, I said on Monday I would consider it a disappointment if Bo Nix on the opposite end, Michael Penix, we know is not going to start because he's got Kirk Cousins ahead of him. Mm-hmm. But when you got Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham ahead of you, you expect your 24-year-old rookie to start. And if he doesn't start week one, I'll be a little disappointed. By week two, I'll be I'll start, running up some red flags. That said, I didn't expect him to be the week 1 starter for preseason. I expect that to be Jarrett Stidham. It's just it's almost like a respect thing. When you've got a guy that's been there at least a year, we're not talking Caleb Williams here, who came in and we shipped out the former starter and you're our guy. You're my number 1 guy. This is a little different. So on that note, let's get back to some Falcons. Funeral Services says, we are here. We're here. Good to see you. Terry Clark says, good morning, ATL. Coach Scott, Father Nick. It's here finally. Let's go. Yes, it is. Nando is here as well. He says, good day, Scott, Nick in the chat. That's all, y'all. So we're going 12-5 this season and win the Super Bowl. We just need to trade for Micah Parsons. Oh my goodness, would that be expensive? What do you think Micah Parsons gets in a trade right now? I'd say the bidding starts at 2 first-rounders and a starter.
I'd say 2 firsts and a second, probably, because you're gonna have to pay him unbelievable money as well. But also there is the background still. It exists. There's been he's been fun to talk to, but I think there is still a opinion of some volatility there potentially. So not like physically, just you don't know exactly what you're going to get from him off the field. So
we talk about trust, Nick. Coaches trust. Can you trust? You give when Micah gets his $25 million, actually up to 30 now on edge rushers, aren't they? When they gets his, let's say 5 years at 30, 150 guarantee, 3.5 of them at $100 million guaranteed. Do you trust him to live up to that contract over the course of the next 5 years? That's a risk. It's all a risk, of course.
Yeah.
But he's got different risks.
And I gotta say though, I mean, I know that he had the Penn State incident. There's been some questions about immaturity in the past, but I love hearing him talk. He's a fun person to listen to as well. But if he's available, he's probably the second best pass rusher in football. I still got to give it to Myles Garrett.
Myles Garrett, number 1.
Yep. Yeah. But that's if he's available, I'd be interested for sure. I don't know what's going on with the Cowboys, and hopefully my internet's not tanking too much right now.
What just happened to me?
Is it you?
That might be me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but you're frozen on my screen. All right. Well, there goes Scott for a second. So we'll keep it going. But yeah, thank you so much, Nando, for the comment here. Great to see you. I don't know if that was Scott or me going on. BRB, says Scott. All right. Well, I'm running the show now. Good to see you. Of course, we got Cam coming in and says it's nice to see Calais be a bridge between teams, not wasting time fighting. Yeah, absolutely. Good to see you, Michael, as well. And we'll get right into it. The thing that is pretty surprising to me, not surprising, but good to see, is Michael Penix, number 2 on the depth chart. Really happy to see that happening. Not wasting around any time. Nothing too crazy going on with the depth chart, but Penix as the number 2 quarterback, not really a surprise, right? You have Nathan Rourke, you got Taylor Heineke, but Penix is the guy, of course. So he are going to be the guy. So not wasting any times. I hope we get a lot of reps of his in the preseason. That would be fantastic if we could get that going. So hopefully that is hopefully that's all fine with Michael Penix. Hopefully we can stay healthy. The Falcons, I feel like, have done a decent job working on the offensive infrastructure around Penix. So he should be set up to succeed. Now, what does success look like for Michael Penix? Just getting out there and running the offense, making the simple play. I know it's boring, but how's he doing with the verbiage of the offense? Relaying the information in the huddle, the pre-snap checks, everything like that. If the box is heavy, audible into a pass. If the box is light, getting to a run, and just making the right reads. Not trying to do too much. I feel like that's where a lot of rookies get in trouble. They try to do too much. So can he go out there and just do the simple stuff? I'm also curious to see what it looks like in a more NFL concepts. Penix has an incredible arm, but it was a lot of shotgun, vertical, air raid-esque concepts out there with Washington last season. And there's Scott again. So we're just talking a little bit of Michael Penix here and expectations with that first game being listed number 2. But really just looking for the simple things. I mean, it's boring as heck. The verbiage of the playbook, getting that in there, and making the right reads, staying healthy. How does that look like with the offensive line? I'm excited to see, but excited also he's listed as number 2.
Sorry about that, y'all. I ran a video drive update on my computer this morning. I've been up since 4:45, but it didn't ask me to restart my computer because everything was fine. It's logged in, everything is good, and then when I switched tabs, everything blanked out on me. So I'm like, all right, let's give this a good old-fashioned restart, like I probably should have, and we're good to go. There's appreciate you holding it down, Nick. There's lots of talk in here about something that I wanted to get into, and we'll get into it again later because it's Justin Simmons. This is a guy that we have advocated for the Atlanta Falcons, who's still a free agent, who is visiting the New Orleans Saints. I don't want Justin Simmons in New Orleans while we're rolling out Richie Grant. I want Justin Simmons in Atlanta and let Richie Grant go to New Orleans. So that was one of the things on the depth chart. Richie Grant is listed number 1 ahead of safety DeMarco Hellams, which those were flipped at the end of last season. Does the light bulb come on for Richie this year? He's got plenty of talent, good in coverage, big hitter as far as physically speaking, but the game has just seemed a little too fast for him up until this point, which is why we have advocated for free agent Justin Simmons.
I mean, you still have 1 more year of cost control left, right? He was a 3rd round selection. So there is talent there, and the ability to take away the football was one of the things that stood out with him at UCF. So we'll see. I mean, it's probably more of we have a young cost control guy and we're going to let these two battle and we're going to recast the die next season. Probably
$4 million. I mean, that's good money for a safety. It's not that cost controlled. I mean, it's controlled because it's not variable, but it's
I also don't think
he's middle of the pack in money right now for safeties, like 15th. He ain't playing 15th. He played about 83rd last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brown Cow, I don't know what's going on there, but good luck with your education.
Yeah, I think I already deleted one of these earlier. So just stop. This is last warning. Either you are upset, that's fine. We're all pretty cynical. Or if you're trolling, then just go away.
Yeah, God bless. Yeah, whatever. Good luck. It's we'll see what happens with Grant. I guess $4 million that's surprising.
We've talked about that because he's in the 4th year, which is basically almost like a 5th-year option for a day 2 guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he's like 3.8, and you save 3.2 if you waive him. So we've had Richie Grant cut since last year. For the amount of money, you save almost $3 million. Well, $3 million. And I've said that Justin Simmons is going to probably get around 7, is what I've been saying for the last 6 months, that he's affordable. Yeah, the Falcons don't have a ton of available money, but they got enough to work something around to bring in Justin Simmons if they need to. That's for sure. Because as Michael says, good to see you, Michael. Thanks for the care package again. Hope y'all are doing well. I know, speaking of having a rough go of it, Michael's had a rough go of it the last couple months too. That's my internet. That one just flashed right there, Nick. If I froze up again. So we got all kinds of problem going on in Johns Creek today.
It could be StreamYard too.
But I could find a way to get money for Justin Simmons if they thought they needed him. I worry a little bit about the arrogance of coaching with 4 defensive backs coaches on this team. We'll just coach them up. That scares me a little bit.
Especially on the defensive side. I mean, you can hide some stuff with scheme, but the actual coaching, I don't know. These guys are born, not made necessarily. Safeties and linebackers, we could argue a little bit, but it'll be interesting to follow what happens with Richie Grant going forward. I mean, like you mentioned, we all but wrote him off, but he's still kicking it around here. And when you have a guy like Jesse Bates next to him, you don't have to worry, I think, as much. I'm more worried about, the cornerback situation and the edge rusher room than I am the second safety right now on this Falcons defense. But good for Grant. I mean, we both liked him coming out. I had questions about he does have some big hits, but his actual tackling consistency, coming in the alley, there's missed tackles. And when you're a safety, you can't have that. You can't have that, especially with how spread and quick everything is nowadays. You better be able to frickin' tackle in the open field consistently. But good to see him stepping up and pulling for him too, right? Last year of his contract, he hopefully has a good season and goes out there and earns a nice second deal. Granted, $4 million this year. He is making okay money as it is. He's not like a 7th rounder out here, a UDFA, but the second contract is meant to be the game changer for a lot of these guys. So hopefully he does it.
And I don't expect him to make more next year than he's making this year.
Probably not with the safety.
It'd be great if he does.
For him.
That means he had a hell of a season.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, if he, it's like, oh, man, I always think it's kind of funny. It's like, oh, he's going to be too expensive next year. Oh, okay. So it was kind of the Jeff Okudah argument. Well, Jeff Okudah, if he plays and he's a $10 million corner, great. That's fine with me. Bring him in. If Richie plays, that was the Justin Fields argument. Well, you're going to have to pay him anyway. Okay, great. If I get a $30 million quarterback in 2024 and have to pay him 40 in 2025, great. That's a good thing. That means you're more than likely in the playoffs. So if Richie's making more money next year than he's making this year, because he's on about average money for salary. I think I've looked it up and it's like between 15 and 18. If you're talking, maybe it was like 30 because there's 64 safeties, but he's right. He was right in the middle of average. And if he ends up making more money next year, that's a good thing for the Atlanta Falcons and Richie Grant. If they end up paying him, so be it. But it means he's had a good year, which is what we're looking for. And yeah, there was a little scrap yesterday. I guess things got a little physical with Drake London, and he stood up, took exception. Dolphins defensive back stood up, took exception. Little brouhaha. And as 10 Cam says, it's nice to see Calais be a bridge between the teams and not wasting time fighting. Yeah, you got to go out and have a little pushy shovey. We don't mind that out there. And if there's 2 guys on the field that I'm gonna kind of get behind in a battle royale, it'd probably be Calais Campbell and Caleb McGarry. Those are 2 of the most physically imposing guys on the field.
Yeah. Definitely don't want to get between them. I don't mind it too much. I mean, these guys have been going at it with, since July, right? They really kind of get pretty frustrated with each other at that point. They need some fresh blood, right? We talk about it being a zero sum. Well, same guys over and over again. You don't love the fighting, but also you understand it when it's the infighting stuff. As long as it doesn't get too elevated or it's not consistent and continuously disrupting practice, then we have a problem. Then people are going to be running wind sprints and maybe, have to do the, what is the thing the parents do? They put them in like the big oversized sweatshirt. This is our getting along shirt. I mean, you have to get something very big for some of those guys out there, but hopefully just a one and done and can move forward, and they're going to get some fresh blood to go against here pretty soon.
Mr. Shown Up says, good morning, guys. I heard on another podcast the Falcons started off slow in the first half of the Dolphins, but then won the second half. That was probably the Falcoholic podcast you were on last night. I know Daniel Flick was going to be a guest on that last night, and Daniel has a spectacular write-up on Falcons SI that recapped everything. So, and that's kind of what he said. So I would imagine he said the same thing last night. And if you heard it somewhere else, then you just got another opinion on that, because I know that's what Daniel wrote up, that it started off a little slow, and then it was slicing and dicing with Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix. And I think one of the things that Daniel has really made a point to point out is Michael Penix's completion percentage might not be as good, but he's also being more aggressive. He's taking more shots. I want that out of my rookie in preseason, in training camp, is to go out there and be, so he might be 8 for 16, but take 4 shots of 20 plus yards instead of just 1. So the point is, did the Falcons handle the quarterback position 100% the right way? There's arguments for and against, whatever you want to, but there's no question, if you're going to overspend and get it right, the Falcons should have a quarterback this year, Nick. And that was the big problem last year. Did you overcorrect? Okay, if I'm going to overcorrect anywhere, let's have it be at the quarterback position.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, back to the slices of the pie. There's only so much out there, right? Like I know you're seeing probably Scott Romadunze, a lot of highlights out there in Chicago. How would that be for the immediate Falcons team versus Penix? But Raheem Morris and a lot of these guys drafting in a way with job security, right? And the not overexpenditure, but heavy expenditure of resources. So we'll see how it plays out, but hard not to be excited about the long-term prospect, especially given the desert that Falcons fans have crossed over and over again since Matt Ryan left. Let's even say Matt Ryan's last season in Atlanta. I mean, it's not a long period, said the Bronco fan who watches Iowa Hawkeye offense. But you should have answers there that at least give you B-level quarterback play in the immediacy. I won't say for sure B-level with Penix yet because
Right.
unknown. But
that's one of the things that we never really got into at all with the Michael Penix draft pick, because there was so much question of like, how did you allocate your resources? Was this the right pick at 8? Did they overdraft? Frankly, I think they all got overdrafted, honestly. I mean, you go from 6 quarterbacks in the first 12. Are they really all that good? What was it? I think what I hear on a podcast the other day that Tom Brady was the 6th quarterback taken in that class.
I said that. Yep, that was me.
So it's like, yeah, you do overspend on the quarterback position. It doesn't matter if Michael Penix hits, but if he doesn't, that's kind of the thing everybody's assuming right now about this whole situation, is that Michael Penix is going to be a hit in 2026. What if he's not? Maybe he's not. Now you're right back in that boat. But to their point, we like the guy, we're going to take him. And I'm okay with that. I am okay with that.
Especially at quarterback.
Yeah, at quarterback, trust your board. Nobody's going to get them all right. I'm not grading with hindsight, saying, you should have done this. Oh, you could have had Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft. Man, if anybody had any idea what Brock Purdy was going to be, he never was going to last till the last pick. And that's what I mean by grading with hindsight. Coming in with foresight, though, as a coach, he says, "Morning, fam. Have a great day and the rest of your week." He's got the coffee emoji coming up. I'll drink to that. Thank you, Coach. Appreciate you being in. Terry Clark comes in. He has a question. He says, Arnold Ebiketie being outplayed. That was one of the guys that we hit on as maybe a little bit of a disappointment so far. This year is like stock down as Ebiketie is not taking that step and is getting outplayed, because the depth chart lists 2 outside linebackers, but they're not playing 2 edges a lot. They're playing a very similar scheme to what we saw last year. And I still think that's out of necessity, Nick. When the strength of this team is you could go 9 NFL caliber defensive linemen and, a couple of average guys at edge. Why am I going to force edges on the field when I got all these DL and some pretty good inside linebackers?
The only thing is that the edge is the setting the edge aspect, right? For the integrity of the defense. In theory, you can put linebackers out there, but they're typically smaller. They just don't have the same base to do that very often. I mean, so that's the one thing I'd be nervous about. Maybe you get really creative on third downs and there's different looks there, but what does it look like on first and second down? Are you going to play those like third down, kind of like we saw last season? Just need to see it in theory. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in like Madden or whatever in theory that might work well, but you do have to be able to sit there, hold your gap down and stop the run first, just with how defenses are built up front. So on third down, second and long, et cetera, get exotic, get fun. But I do have a hard time seeing where you're like completely abandoning the 2 edge rush look. Now, you can have a little bit of flexibility with a guy like Dorless, right? A guy like Zach Harrison. They also factor into what your front can look like. You can be a little lighter on one side, heavier on the other, kind of like those Legion of Boom Seahawks. But want to see what that actually looks like from a formational on the field perspective.
Robbie Red has a good question, because speaking of depth chart, where we don't have any questions on the depth chart is pretty much the entire offense. We joked about that, in camp battles. It's like, let's see, offensive camp battles, number 3 wide receiver, and I'm done. That's pretty much it when we're talking about the starting 11, and a number 3 wide receiver might not even be a starting 11. But the Seahawks just signed Connor Williams to a 1 year up to $6 million. He had a PFF grade of 86.5. What do you think the Falcons paid Dalman with his 83 PFF rating? Now, didn't Connor Williams have some injury concerns also? Am I not mistaken on that one?
Oh, yeah, he failed over and over again with a bunch of different teams out there. I'm actually surprised he signed. I think it's the ACL is concerning for him. But no, yeah, he's got a big injury concern.
Yeah, so that's part of it. He's worth more than that when he's playing, but again, that's a reflection of his unavailability at times. But he asked about Dalman. He says, try and avoid the Lloyd Cushenberry money, although in my opinion, Dalman's a much better center than Cushenberry. I would have rather had Dalman than Cushenberry. I watched Cushenberry for 3 years. with the Broncos. Bad, okay, was kind of how I said was okay. He worked his way up to an average NFL center. And then he's tied for the second highest paid average contract in the NFL at 12 and a half. I think Cushenberry gets, I think Dalman, if he plays another season like this, I think he's going to get an 8-figure deal. By 8 figures, I mean 10 plus million. That would put him in the top 5 as a free agent. That's just kind of the way it works. Is he a top 5 center? Maybe, maybe not. Is he a top 5 available center? Yeah, he probably will be. So I think you're going to see Dalman in a similar, call it 3 years, $36 million with 22 guaranteed, something along those lines. So it turns out to be a 2-year, $10 million contract. I think we're in that range if Dalman plays similarly or takes a step up and is even maybe a little better, which you're hoping for in this year, that he's going to get some money. So we talked about depth charts. There's not much going on with depth charts on the offensive side of the ball other than Ray McLeod is the head of Darnell Mooney. That's it.
Not Darnell Mooney, Rondale Moore.
Him. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to confuse those guys. It's the first time I've done it. I almost said it on Monday. Mooney and Moore, they got added them like in the same week, and I'm going to confuse them a zillion times until I see them on the field. So
Moo, right?
Mooney and Moore. God, I was coaching baseball. I had these 2 kids. They met them like right next to each other, Lennon and Lawson.
Good luck.
I was done. I was done. No. Darnell Mooney is almost in Sharpie as the number 2. Ray is ahead of Rondale. Ray ahead of Rondale for Rondale, yes.
No, you're right. It's confusing because all the
Ray is ahead of Rondale for the number 3 / slot wide receiver role. That's really the only camp battle on offense that's going on.
Yep. I will be curious to see about the depth of the offensive line. That's something we kind of talked about while you were getting your computer all sorted out there, Scott. But when you have a young quarterback, especially one who was hardly breathed on in Washington, because of the Pac-12 defenses and just the offensive infrastructure they had there with the Huskies. But the depth of the offensive line is something I'm always curious, and you don't really hopefully get a chance to see it, but you do in preseason. How does Penix operate behind a less than ideal offensive line? I mean, because the way it's set up, Scott, I mean, you know this, but just for the chat in here, the difference in talent level when you go from your first team offensive line to second team offensive line compared to your first team defensive line to second team defensive line is astronomical. If offensive line's at a disadvantage with the defensive line, but then you get second string, and those second string guys are getting a lot of snaps. You're hopefully never seeing your second string offensive line. So, I mean, preseason can be just a baptism by fire for some of these quarterbacks when they're playing with second and third string, because I mean, it's crazy how incompetent some of the pass blockers look in those situations. So I'm not worried for Penix. And, I'm guessing that he's going to get a fair chance behind 1s in preseason as well. But is he going to be behind 2s and 3s? What does that look like? What does the Falcons even look like with those guys, let alone what's the quarterback look like behind those guys?
Yeah, I think the depth is a lot better. And again, he'll be going against 2s and 3s, which, but like you said, the defensive line is typically better. That gets mitigated a little bit by you should be able to dictate to the next guy, to the other team. So it helps mitigate the athleticism advantage, because Silas comes down and roll into what you're pointing to. This question from Silas says, how do you both think the D line and rotation is looking? And then Jay asked about Eddie Goldman too. And you look at the depth chart, and I think one of the reasons I think the Atlanta Falcons depth chart means more than most is because we weren't expecting any of the rookies to be in the first team. So you're not disappointed. And you're like, wait, Bijan Robinson's listed 4th. What is this? It's nonsense. That is what it is. But what we do have here is the veterans, and you see Kentavious Street ahead of Eddie Goldman. Okay, maybe Eddie's had a good camp and has a really good chance of making the team. When Daniel put out his 53, he had Zion Logue off the team, and he strongly considered keeping 9 defensive linemen. He still kept 8, because you got to figure Brandon Dorlus is going to make it. He had Eddie Goldman and Kentavious Street on the team, Ruka Rohuro, Taquan Graham, Zach Harrison, David Onyemata, and Grady Jarrett. That's 8 guys. And I'm like, whew. Now, the Falcons did waive a 6th-round draft pick 2 years ago, the guard from Georgia, name slip on my mind. He made the team on the reserves. Let me see. What was his name?
It's not Fitzpatrick.
No, it was the offensive guard. He doesn't look like he's on the team anymore. But they did cut him. It doesn't happen real often, especially a team that's strapped with salary cap money. But this team isn't quite as, they're up against it. They've spent, but they're not in salary cap hell like they were. But there is a little bit of a precedent there.
Justin Schaefer.
Cutting, who was it now?
Justin Schaefer.
Yes, Justin Schaefer. They did cut him coming out of camp and re-sign him to the practice squad. Would they think about doing the same thing with Zion Logue? Maybe. Rotation's looking good. Defensive line, going back to Nick's point on the defensive line rotation, it's the most heavily rotated position in the game. The inside linebacker, safeties, and corners and offensive linemen typically play every snap. You're hoping they play every snap of the game. You'll see some rotation at wide receiver with packages. You'll see a lot of rotation at running back. That's probably the other one. And but defensive line is the place where depth matters beyond injuries. And I think the Falcons' defensive line is the strongest part of this team, Nick.
Ooh, man.
With the depth. When you can line up, I think of it like a wrestling match. Okay, 1 versus 1, this team wins. They get a point. 2 versus 2, this team wins. That's how I measure strength. I measure it by depth. And 1 through 8, I think this team matches up with anybody in depth in the NFL. May not be the best, but I think it's the strength of this team.
Yeah, I think I agree with you there.
And running back.
Yeah. I was going to say quarterback too, right? Because you just have one guy.
You got a rookie and a guy who's coming off an injury. So I have bigger questions at quarterback than I do at defensive line.
Yeah, that's true. I will say that on the defensive line, I don't want to disparage Grady Jarrett, but I don't think he's one of the top 5 interior defensive linemen in football right now. And having a singular superstar defensive lineman, pass rusher, I think makes more of a difference than a lot of spots. Granted, it's different ways to skin a cat. I hate that saying, but like you had the Eagles a couple years ago where did they have an actual absolute superstar on that defensive line when they had an ungodly amount of sacks and pressures? No, but their second string defensive line could have started for a lot of teams. So when you have that level of depth and waves, you can do things. I will say though, Scott, it's just because everything is connected. And it's not fair because we need to be able to isolate them to analyze them. But the lack of talent at edge might have a little bit of an impact on the ability of the interior defensive line and just the advantageous looks they can get. But I'm with you. I mean, if you want to lump in like Zach Harrison as well, excited to see these flashes from Ruka Rohiro, who there's no pressure to get out there. Just a freak athlete. Hopefully he'll step up. Obviously, you got we always loved Graham, right? Grady Jarrett. Contavious Street. I saw a question about Eddie Goldman. Eddie Goldman, I think, is, from what I've heard, been solid so far. So it's a good unit. It's definitely the anchor of the defense and the deepest part of the defense. You might want to argue running back, but we're both Tyler Algier fanboys. So he's great.
Yeah, the running back position might be the strongest part of this team relative to other places. Corey Ellison, this is a good thing. This is a good thing right here. I haven't really heard much about Matthew Bergeron, second-year guard, left guard out of Syracuse. How's he doing? Really good, because you haven't heard much about him. That's a good thing. This team, it feels so much different than teams that we've grown up with. I say grown up or, lived with the last several years. This team is strong in the trenches. It really is. The offensive and defensive lines have been rebuilt. Credit Arthur Smith. Credit Terry Fontenot over the last 3 years. Give credit. It was too late, but Dimitroff, Caleb McGarry was his draft pick. Jake Matthews was his draft pick. That was one to pair with Matt Ryan a long time ago, so he at least recognized that. But McGarry and Lindstrom, I'm pretty sure, were in the same draft class. It was just too late. By then, they'd missed their window. But they're strong in the trenches. They've invested money into the defensive line. Now, rather than, because I just said too late, rather than wait for it to be too late, they just got their defensive line of the future in this last draft class. They spent 5 picks on 4 on the defensive line and then an inside linebacker. So they recognize where do we need to be in 2 years? Well, that's where you're hoping Hero, Dorless, Trice, Logue, those guys can really step up. So good foresight. Again, I'm listening to, I was looking at Rusty's comments here. Scott, I went back multiple times and watched your live reaction to the Falcons drafting Michael Penix. It never gets old. This draft wasn't about, if you take win now out of the equation, this draft was about where do we need to be in 2 years, which that's not necessarily a bad way to go. And Rusty, I've watched it myself also, and I'm proud of the fact, like within the first 10 seconds, I say this isn't about Michael Penix. This isn't a knock on the Michael Penix himself. This is a knock on resource allocation, which I disagree. We've been through that a zillion times. Let's see, Eric. He's got this to say. We got about 5 or so minutes left in the show, then we're going to get out of here. So if you got any burning desires, get them in there. Eric says, it's AK's 3rd year. I hope he turns a corner. He's talking about Ebiketie, no pun intended. He can get at least, if he can add 2 to last year's total, I'll take it. What do you have, 6 last year? That'll put him at 8. Sacks, the fact that we'd be happy with 8 sacks is sad, a little bit. What's amazing to me, though, is you get 42 sacks and nobody has more than 6.5. So there is room there for a top guy for sure.
Yeah. There is no doubt to have a top guy in there, and we'll continue to hunt without a doubt. So last show before the preseason game, obviously, Scott, we talked excited about Michael Penix. I want to see what some of these non-elite pass rushers look like, because there's going to be, obviously it's going to be funneled more so through Pitts and London, but how does Mooney look? How is he deployed exactly? Can Moore be more of a gamer, get the ball in his hands, create some stuff? Ray McLeod, we haven't even talked about it, but shout out to the Flicks article talks about McLeod having the kickoff, the special team stuff over Williamson, which is shocking considering how great Williamson was. So just a lot of fun things to catch up on.
Yeah, I think one of the questions is, does Avery Williams make this roster? He's listed number 3 running back right now. I don't think he can make this team as a position player, so he's got to make it. And will you keep to a special teams only guy when you've got a dual threat like Ray McLeod? That's one of the big questions for me over the next 3 weeks. Sam says, we already talked about Simmons meeting with the Aints. Yes. That's still a player I would advocate for, is Justin Simmons. Now, we've seen the Falcons, we do Mile High Huddle next. Talk a lot of Broncos who hit the waiver wires. Kareem Jackson, no. Dalton Reisner was linked to the Atlanta Falcons. I said, hell no. Wrote a big column on this about how disastrous that is, and people looking at stats and not watching football, because stats lie. Justin Simmons is a guy I would advocate for. He would fit in perfectly with this team, and I think if they feel like they need some extra help, they could find the money to do it. I mentioned the arrogance of coaching. I don't mean just the Atlanta Falcons coaches. I mean coaches in general. There's always this thought of, we can fix this guy. I can coach this guy up. And there are a lot of defensive backs coached on this, from Jerry Gray, Raheem Moore, Jimmy Lake, 1, 2, 3. Those guys are all defensive back coaches by nature. That's where they've cut their teeth in the NFL, in growing up, earning their stripes. And they didn't make a single move in the defensive back room, which was struggled last year. Is there this thought that we can make this work? Okay. Maybe you can. Maybe you can. I'd like to see Justin Simmons. And Brian, real quick, and then I'll flip it back over to you before we get out of here. Wasn't Dalman a Dimitrov pick? No, he was in the very first draft class with Richie Grant. He was the pickup with the Broncos. The Denver Broncos and Atlanta Falcons swapped second-round picks, and the Denver Broncos took Javonte Williams, a running back, and the Falcons traded down and took Richie Grant, and they got a 4th-round pick in return that they used on Dalman, and Dalman may end up being the best player out of both of those. The one that hurts is the pick after Javonte Williams in that draft was Javon Holland. I think he's made 2 Pro Bowls already at safety. So if you maybe had stayed and picked Holland, that's the one that hurts a little bit. But this is why we advocate. We like more picks, because it gives you more of a chance to hit. And Dalman's been a hit. not just for a 4th-round center, but he's a good center in the NFL.
I mean, considering Cushenberry's what the 2nd highest paid now, what is Dalman going to actually get? You talked about keeping it out. Luckily, the center market is very deflated. So it's even, it's 2nd highest paid. It's like, well, the money is compared to guard and tackles is nothing. But yeah, he's been a good player for them, and pretty good offensive line. We'll see about McGarry this year, right? He's the big question mark with the new scheme. Probably going to leave him a little bit more vulnerable. Hopefully the quarterback play helps him out some, but we're on McGarry watch.
Last thing, and then we're going to go is A137 Sauce says, morning, guys. What do you thought on the linebacker group? I think it's one of our strongest position groups to me. I think you got 2 good players right now, and Caden Ellis and Nate Landman played really well. And then you've got one who's got absolute superstar potential in Troy Anderson. Is he behind a little bit because he got hurt and didn't get to take that next year of development? Did it help him because all he could do was study and learn and read and get out there? But I've said before, the edge group on this team is not good. It's just not. The defensive line is good. The linebacker group is good. So expect to see something similar to last year. Expect to see those 3 guys on the field at the same time. Ellis, Anderson, Landman, and then Bertrand, which will make this team and back them up. And maybe only one edge at a time where you see out there who was Bud Dupree last year. And I think, was it James Smith-Williams is that guy this year where you only play one edge, and then Ebiketie comes in as a designated pass rusher.
Yeah, we will we'll be on watch there. The one thing, again, injuries are going to happen. So you're like, oh, we have too many here. That can, like that. Now everyone knock on wood, do whatever little grab your rosaries or whatever. But things can change very fast, especially now that we're entering preseason. So
yeah, there's not too many anywhere.
No.
There's not surplus anywhere on a 53-man roster in football.
Not in NFL. College, Alabama running out there at the end.
You make moves for salary reasons and attitude reasons. Those are the only reason you make trades. You don't typically, we got too many of these guys. That doesn't happen in the NFL. Who we can never have too many of is guys like Keith and Ellen Johnson. Thank you for the stars over on Facebook. And Coach, thank you for coming in over on YouTube. Listen, we're going to get out of here. Appreciate everybody checking in and spending the morning with us. Hit those comments. Look forward to some Friday night football. Nick and I will be back on Monday. If you want to continue the conversation, we're going to talk some depth charts. We're going to talk a little bit more Justin Simmons over at youtube.com/Mile High Huddle. We'll get started over there in about 20 minutes. Until then, Nick, any last words? What are you looking forward to on Friday?
I mean, Penix getting out there. The want to see what the defensive line depth actually looks like. Can they control the game and dictate up front continuously? And I mean, the drop-off in passing games is so substantial from the first to second team. I'd love to see the secondary, but the coverages are so vanilla too. I don't know if we're going to get too much from the secondary. So really, defensive line, does Penix belong? Those are the ones I'm excited to see.
Yeah, for me, it's Penix, and I'm pretty sure he had a funny quote just talking, and the video is going to post here in about 30 minutes on YouTube. I've got a schedule for 10 a.m. talking about, are you expected to play? Is like, what? Did you talk to Coach? What'd he say? I thought it was very charismatic. I'd love to know if I'm playing. I want to play. And then I think there's enough depth at the wide receiver position that I'm looking forward to some of those battles. Let's see if Kadero Hodge can step up. Let's see Austin Mack coming off a huge CFL year. Let's see Rondale Moore and Ray McLeod, who are talking about battling it out for that position. So lots of good, and then the rookies. Let's. I don't know that we're going to see a ton of the rookies except in second rotations this year as backups. So let's get a look at those guys. So thanks for taking a look at us this morning. We're going to get out of here. We will see you Monday morning. Thanks a bunch, everybody, for joining us. We will see you next time.
Peace.